The Utah Jazz finished the season 31 and 51, missed the playoffs, missed the play-in. They do this thing every year, and they did it last year too, where they're fun and competitive for the start of the season and then just start tanking. And I kind of feel bad for their head coach, Will Hardy, because being the coach of that, like, yeah, you get to develop and rebuild as a first-time coach, and by all accounts, he's a great coach, but that goes on your record, and that kind of makes it hard to get future jobs. Like, he's 68 and 96 right now, and I look at Utah, it's probably going to be much of the same this upcoming season. Like Lauri Markkanen, great player, became an all-star when he got traded to Utah and, signed this massive 5-year, $238 million extension in the offseason, which he signed after a specific deadline so that he couldn't get traded this year because he loves being in Utah. Great for him, but like what is on the roster that really gets you excited if you're a Utah Jazz fan for like the future? Like you've got Lowry, who is an all-star. I just don't think he's a superstar or a number one option on a title team. And I look at the rest of the roster, you've got young guys that aren't really worth getting excited about. Like, if you asked me a couple years ago, yeah, Walker Kessler would be the great, you know, center of the future and what have you. But he now plays 23 minutes a game off the bench. He's not that great on offense. Still great on defense, still rebounds, blocks shots, the whole 9 yards, but can't really play him at the four because Lowry plays a lot of minutes there, and John Collins plays a lot of minutes there. And speaking of John Collins, can't play Kessler at the five with Collins because they both do the same stuff on offense. Like they're not really good shooters. Collins is a worse defender, but he does other things that Kessler doesn't. And now for Kessler, it's even worse because they just drafted Kyle Filipowski in the second round, considered a steal. I don't know if he is, but I tend not to care about rookies in these sorts of videos. And then they also, for some inexplicable reason, signed Drew Eubanks. That seems like a curious signing, especially since he didn't do that well in Phoenix last year. So what's the play with that? But whatever. Kessler, like I said, it's concerning that he hasn't been able to become the sort of cornerstone center. So I wonder if he gets traded at some point to that end. For other younger players on the roster, what's really left? You traded Akbaji last year. You traded Fontecchio last year. Not that either of them were all that great, but they were at least, raw and young. Now you have Taylor Hendricks, who didn't really play that much last year. He played 21 minutes a game for 40 games. You have Keontae George, who was a very, very ineffective shooter, particularly in the 2-point range. I've got a stat here. Field goal percentage inside the arc, he was the third worst among qualified players. That's kind of alarming and doesn't bode well for the future, but we'll see. But again, neither of those guys sound like cornerstones or all stars, even to be quite honest. As for the rest of the roster, you've got veterans still there that really shouldn't be, like John Collins. What's he doing in Utah? Like Atlanta didn't want him, and Utah did. I don't know why. Like he should be elsewhere now. He's just his contract's too big. He's not that good defensively. He's not that good offensively, except for like lobs and rim running. So maybe some team takes a flyer on him. I don't know. You've also got Colin Sexton. Great, for scoring, 20, 25 a game, plays tough and all that, but is a shot first point guard, has always been and will always be. Not great for being, a title contending team in the future. Again, a guy that some other team could take an interest in, I'm sure. And then last but not least, Jordan Clarkson. Jordan Clarkson, beloved in Utah. He loves being in Utah by all accounts, and that's great. But he's 32 years old, shot 29% from three last year, and stat that I think is pretty telling about his sort of performance. Utah was 18 and 0 when he had a positive plus minus rating. They were 4 and 32 when he had a minus plus minus rating. Yeah, 44 and 32. I just had to double check my notes, excuse me. But that's another guy that I'm sure some team would love, a veteran who could maybe get hot at some point, give a little scoring punch off the bench. But that's sort of Utah in a nutshell. You've got this core of young guys that aren't exciting, old guys that should be traded. Lowry, who's going to be there for the long haul because he can't be traded this year, and who knows if he gets traded ever. So what's the play? Like trying to get a superstar in the offseason or even during the season? Like, I don't think that makes a lot of sense, especially not this year when the West is super competitive. So I think if you're Utah, you're going to be in that 12 to 15 range in the West, maybe 11th, but the West is super duper competitive, especially this year. So I have them 14th, 15th personally, and I just see them doing the same sort of play fun for the start of the year, tank at the end of the year, get a good draft pick. Although I should mention that their draft pick is only top 10 protected. If not, it goes to OKC. So that kind of speaks to they can't really try and compete for a play-in without losing their pick. So they're going to go for a bottom pick, I'm sure. But where they actually end up is based on how much they want to try and compete with Lowry there.